Welcome to Ask Ashley Live. I'm here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, where you can come on. This is a call in show where you can come on and ask questions if you'd like. You can use the link in the description of the YouTube video. So if you're watching this on Instagram, if you're watching this on Facebook, you can go to ashley.tube and you'll see me live right there. And you can click the link in the description, and that will allow you to come on here live. It'll allow you to check your camera, check your mic, and then you can come on here live. So I'm going back and forth between two different cameras. So if you see me looking back and forth, that's why. I'm trying to stay kind of centered in each of them. But I'm over on Instagram at Ashley Jangro. I'm on Facebook. My Facebook page is Ashley Jangro, and I'm on ashley.tube on my YouTube channel. So if we don't have anyone jump on, what I do during the Ask Ashley Live is I just address something that I teach a concept. I talk about something that's going on in my life, or I've had an opportunity to teach something to my daughters, or where I'm having a breakthrough with my own mental health stuff that I've worked on with my coach. And so that's what you get when you come visit Ask Ashley Live. I'm really excited today to share about a conversation that I had with my daughter last night. So I'm just going to talk about what we had a discussion about, tell you the strategy I used, and kind of the strategies that I've used to get to the point where we could have that discussion. In case you're new here, in case you are in case you're watching the recording later, I want to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Ashley Jangro. I'm a life coach. I'm a mental wellness coach. I work with moms whose kids may or may not be struggling with mental health to learn strategies to build up their own mental strength and to get support that they need to raise mentally strong kids. So this might be moms that are struggling with their kids, not struggling with their kids, whose kids are struggling with something like anxiety or depression. And they want to learn those skills and strategies that they can use to help their kids because they're struggling to get support anywhere else. Also, people with young kids who just want to know how to raise kids with the strategies that will increase mental wellness as they get older. Because moms, as we know, there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot that's impacting our kids' mental health. And so this is our opportunity to really band together and come up with those strategies, to learn those strategies, to I'm just getting comments. So I'm checking those comments too, to learn those strategies and to get the support we need for our own mental wellness as our kids are struggling. So that's where I am at. So welcome to Ask Ashley Live. So as I mentioned, I wanted to share about a conversation I had with my daughter last night. Now, my daughter has been struggling for quite some time with an individual in her life that she's angry with, that she's hurt by, that she's just really struggling with. And we talk about it often. I often help her listen to what's being said and try to see things from a different perspective, try to see it from that individual's point of view, to try to hear the words differently, we try all these different things. And often those things work. And sometimes these emotions that she's experiencing, this irritation or anger or hurt, persist. And so what I always do is I go back and I think a lot about it and I think, okay, how can I help her differently? It's not always working to try to see it from a different perspective. It's not always working to try to hear those words as caring or as not about her, but about the other individual. So I was thinking about this a lot lately, and I talked to her last night, and she was upset and she was feeling frustrated. And I thought this is maybe not the best time for me to try to say, okay, let's think about it from this other person's perspective. So I thought I'm going to try something different. And I asked her first, do you want coaching? Do you want me to coach you on it? And she said yes, because I'd really like to get through this. I'd really like to overcome this. And I always ask permission because no one wants to have their thoughts or emotions questioned or challenged or any of that without permission. And so at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about strategies I've used leading up to that so that she does come to me to ask for help with coaching as opposed to feeling resistant to that. So I'm just going to talk about that at the end. And so I shared with her, you know what? Sometimes in my life, I notice that when I'm feeling angry with someone, when I'm feeling hurt by someone, any emotion that keeps me focused on them sometimes is a way to protect myself from feeling something uncomfortable. And it's really interesting because by focusing on what they're doing, by focusing on how I feel about them, I never have to look at how I feel or what that feeling is in me. And in that way, I'm teaching my brain that whatever that feeling is in me is actually dangerous. I'm avoiding that feeling in me by remaining focused on them. And so I just invited her to kind of investigate in her own brain for a moment. If you weren't focused on this other individual that is making you, or that you're feeling angry towards, or that you're feeling hurt by, then what other feeling might be there? And we brought up a specific instance, and I asked her, if you weren't thinking about that other individual, what might you be thinking about you? Because there's something in there that feels scary to think or feels scary to feel. And if we can identify that and then just sit here and feel it, practice feeling it, open up to that feeling, we're going to teach our brains that that feeling is not dangerous and it's not going to feel so scary. And so what will happen then is when you're faced with a similar situation, instead of feeling hurt, instead of feeling angry, you'll be able to look inside and either agree or just be open to what's happening because you're not needing to protect yourself from feeling something. So that's a little bit of a convoluted way to explain it, but I just asked her, if you weren't thinking about this person, what might you be thinking? And she thought about it for a long time. And I gave her some examples. I'm like, maybe you're feeling embarrassed. Maybe you're feeling ashamed. Maybe you're feeling, and she thought about it and she said, I'm feeling like maybe I did do something wrong. And, she's told me before, I get really tired of feeling like I'm always doing something wrong. This person always thinks I'm doing something wrong. And she's like, I guess the feeling underneath is maybe I am doing something wrong. And I asked her, when you think maybe I'm doing something wrong, and I'm like, let's even just take the maybe out. Let's just say, let's think for a second. Let's practice thinking this. I'm doing something wrong. When you think that thought, how does that feel in your body? And she thought about it for a minute and she was like, bad, icky. And so we tried to pin down an exact emotion. If it was shame, if it was embarrassment, if it was, if there was any specific emotion that I could help provide her the language for. And she couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. She was just like, it's just an icky feeling. So I'm like, okay, let's practice. Let's practice opening up our bodies to that. And I used an acronym that I had heard recently. I used this acronym with her. It was NOW. Let's name that emotion. She named it bad. She named it icky. Let's open up our bodies to it. Let's allow it to sit there. And then let's witness it moving through our bodies. So name, open, and witness. Really similar to the acronym I use, where we step away from things, stop, slow down, step away, take control over the spinning in our brains, observe the feeling in our body, and process it by describing it. So we did the now, and she named it as bad or icky, and then she opened up to it. And it was interesting because she was like clenching her fists, and she's like, I feel it in my fists and I feel it in my toes. And she was like clenching really hard. And I'm like, just relax into it. Just breathe into that emotion. Notice in your brain, kind of watch inside your brain. Notice that your fists want to clench. Notice that your toes want to tighten, and just watch it. And she was like, yeah, as I do that, it's like moving up through my body. And she's like, now I can feel it in my head and it's like loud, and I feel it in my jaw. And then it like floated away. And she's describing this to me as it is happening. And she's like, whoa, it just floated away. So I'm like, okay, let's do it again. Let's think the thought. I'm doing something wrong. I'm actually doing something wrong. And she, went through the same thing where she wanted to tighten up, but she said, okay, this time it doesn't feel as bad. And we just kept talking through that. Like, what feeling does it bring up? And let's just name it, open up to it, and witness it going through our bodies. And I just sat there and did that with her. And it was really interesting because as we talked through this, and I asked her, how does it feel? We did this for maybe 15 minutes or so. And I asked her, how does it feel to think maybe I'm doing something wrong now? And she was like, it doesn't quite feel as bad. And so we kind of visualized going through the exact same situation that was frustrating for her before, that was making her angry, or that was making her feel hurt. And it produced such a dramatic change because she was like, well, I guess if this person said something to me, I could listen differently. I could be like, oh, yeah, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And she's like, that thought doesn't feel as scary. So what I was doing was teaching her to open up to an emotion so that her brain learned that emotion is not dangerous for you. And as her brain was learning that, and it doesn't always just, happen in one sitting. It's something that we practice over a significant period of time so that it becomes effortless for her brain to view the emotion differently. But in this moment, as she was visualizing it, she's like, why is it scary to think I'm doing something wrong? And she really understood, as I'm focusing on this other individual and as I'm focusing on what I feel about them, I'm protecting myself from feeling an uncomfortable emotion. So what if I just go ahead and feel it and teach my brain it's not dangerous and that it's uncomfortable but manageable? And so she's sitting there and she's like, okay, I guess it does feel uncomfortable, but I can handle it. And it allowed her to visualize reacting differently to the person. It allowed her to visualize not feeling angry or hurt by the person because she wasn't trying to resist any uncomfortable emotion that might come up. It allowed her to begin seeing it from the other individual's perspective because she wasn't trying so hard to resist any emotions that came up. And I talked about in the description of this video that I was teaching her a skill that will serve her mental wellness for the rest of her life. And that is the ability to stay with an uncomfortable emotion. I say all the time in my Mentally Strong Moms program and in the Mom Squad, where I'm teaching about raising mentally strong kids, that if you can teach your kids two skills, the ability to sit with, to allow an uncomfortable emotion and how to process it, and then the ability to investigate what's actually going on in their brains and question those thoughts, they will be so far ahead of the game when it comes to mental wellness. Because something that I notice constantly with our kids and with all the kids I work with in schools and through coaching, through one-on-one coaching, is that they have a real resistance to any uncomfortable emotion. They have an intolerance for uncomfortable emotion. And that has to do with all kinds of reasons, like all the distractions they have immediately available to them. They never have to go through feeling bored, or they never have to go through um, any discomfort because they can immediately distract themselves from it. And it has to do with the way we as parents jump ahead and fix problems for them, or immediately jump to brainstorming a solution as opposed to just helping them learn to allow that uncomfortable emotion. And the way to do that is either the acronym STOP that I teach on my YouTube channel, or the acronym NOW, name it, open up to it, witness it, or slow down, step away. S, take control over the spinning of the brain. Just shut it down. Observe the feeling, how it feels, how it looks, how, the color, the shape, all of that in your body, and process the emotion by describing it. And if our kids can learn those two things, they just will be so far ahead of the game. So I wanted to mention also how it came to be that my daughter was able to come to me and say, hey, I want help with this. Because as we know, a lot of times when we're correcting our kids a lot, they begin to resist. They begin to not want that correction. They're like, I've got this figured out, Mom, I'm good. So I don't focus a lot on saying to my kids, hey, can I coach you? Can I teach you this concept? What I do is I choose to live in transformation and tell stories about it. I tell them about it. The other thing I do is I provide a huge amount of wide open space for any of their emotions. I'm not scared of their emotions. We can handle them. And so instead of immediately trying to get rid of sadness or tears or anger, any of that, I just provide space for it. I ask questions. I sit with them in it. I was going to say I allow them to have those emotions, but it's not like I can control whether or not they're having emotions. I just don't react in a way that indicates I'm uncomfortable with the emotion. So I open up space for it and I validate. I can tell them, I see that you're feeling this thing. I repeat back to them, okay, you're angry because you're feeling um, attacked, or you're feeling lonely, or I talk to them. I try to repeat back to them what they're saying. So they have that space to have any feeling that they're experiencing. And then, like I said, I tell stories. I live in transformation. I experience growth and I tell stories. So I say to them, when I get really angry with them, I say, hey, I realized the other day I was angry with you. I used really harsh words. And I know now that it's because I was trying to protect myself from feeling something uncomfortable. I wasn't doing that intentionally. My brain just does this without me even realizing it. But that's what, after thinking about it, that's what I was doing. I talk about it when we're watching something on TV. I'm like, wow, see how that guy was like super angry at his friend? Isn't it interesting to notice that he was focused on being angry because he didn't want to face that other thing he was feeling about himself? And so we talk about it in terms of me. We talk about it in terms of people on TV, on movies, in books we're reading. And in that way, they begin to hear this language over and over and over. And then even if they can't quite, even if it's not clicking, or which it doesn't click with me all the time, how to use it on myself, I have a coach that walks me through and helps me do that. But even if it's not clicking on how they could apply it to themselves, then they're able to be like, oh, you know what? I know mom has some strategies for these things. And so then they can come to me and say, hey, I'm having a hard time getting over this thing. Can you coach me? And then I have the opportunity to teach something, to teach one of the strategies that I use. And so the strategy that I taught her was to process an emotion, to allow that emotion to sit with it and just allow it to exist, so that she's teaching her brain long term that emotion's not dangerous. And the reason we do that is because a lot of times we have an uncomfortable emotion that's this big, but then we have all the emotions about it that are this, okay, I'm trying to go on both cameras, that are, that make it so much bigger because we're resisting it. And so it becomes such a bigger emotion. So when we just sit there with it and don't try to get rid of it, just allow it to be in our bodies. It's interesting to me because studies have shown that it typically lasts about 90 seconds in our body when we're taking time to allow it. Doesn't always. Sometimes it lasts a lot longer, sometimes it's shorter, but it typically lasts about a minute and a half. And if our kids can learn to do that, then long term, in the future, the emotion will feel less intense and it will be shorter because their brains have realized, oh, we faced this before and we lived through it. It's not dangerous to us. So it becomes not as painful. So I was teaching her that strategy because that is something that will serve her the rest of her life when it comes to her mental wellness. So that is what I have for you today with Ask Ashley Live. If there are any comments, if there's any questions, I invite you to join, jump in, comment on Instagram, on YouTube, or Facebook. But I don't believe there are. So I'm going to sign off. I am, before too long, within, I think it's 20 days from now, March 22nd, launching the next cohort of Mentally Strong Moms. If these strategies are something that interests you, if you'd like to be part of that, please just go to ashleyjangrow.com. There's a button there that says join the waitlist. And by clicking that, entering your name and email, you can get on the waitlist to find out any information about that launch. Or I also invite you to come join my free community, the Mom Squad. You can get to that by going to momsquad.ashley.tube. And it's just a Facebook community where we talk about these things, where I share strategies, where we talk about things mental health. So I would love to see you there. Otherwise, I'll see you back here next week, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time.